Hello and welcome to The Upside. I'm your host, Paul Santinello. This is the show where we talk about all the positive things that are going on in Long Meadow, except for today's show. I'm teasing. I'd like to welcome my guest, Richard Foster. Richard's a fellow select board member, and we're going to talk about just Long Meadow in general and some of the things that, we've had some discussions on our board. Nothing too dangerous to get any of us in trouble.
Right.
Because we can do that on our own. We
Right.
don't have to come to my show to do that. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is that we're going to come up by the time this show airs, you'll start to see things about the budget. There's going to be some capital plan requests, some community preservation requests from the community preservation funds, I should say, and in general maintenance and types of things like that. Richard has done yeoman's work in putting together a presentation that was at the select board meeting about a month ago about some of our deficiencies in town. And, we have this $300 million elephant in the room. And obviously, we're not going to bond for $300 million because, if we do, we're both putting our houses up for sale and leaving.
Right.
So when we talk about things like that, one of the issues that always comes up and says, okay, where do you start when you have that much in what might need repair and or upgraded? Not to mention what we need to do day to day.
Right.
Where do you start in something like that? How do you analyze what's most important?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me come on, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and to the public about this issue.
This is the number one rated show in this time slot.
It's near and dear to my heart. And you're right, we have at least $300 million worth of deficiencies. And that's a staggering total, but it is pretty well documented with engineering studies and even with a visual around our town. I think you're right, we can't do it at one time. It's impossible. It's not going to happen. So we're going to have to the main thing is to identify the resources, and I think we've done that. We have a pretty strong inventory on our deficiencies, at least enough to start with right now. And we have to stop and think if the people are riding our roads, and underneath the roads there's a drainage system, there's water lines, and there's sewage lines, and all of these systems are at various states of, I guess you'd say, decay since they were put in originally. So everything is deteriorating in the town at different time periods. And if you were to assemble a program like our roads, we know we're having trouble with our roads as we drive them, we see the potholes and depressions. So if you took all of the resources and under there, and that's what I think our engineering department will be doing in the next 2 years, is finishing this massive database and layering on a GPS system of all the utilities in our town. And they will start to identify where the oldest, say, sewage lines are, the oldest water lines, and they will start to grid that in with all the other utilities on top. At the end of the road, we should be able to actually divert what money we get to the highest priority need in this community that meets the needs of all of those resources at one time. That's one program. That's how you systematically start to attack it to the biggest benefit of this community and our tax dollars. There's another one that we don't talk too much about. You get a lot better return on your dollar by putting money into a road that is in fair condition than putting the same amount or more money into one that's in poor condition. Because if you remember we showed you on the slides, if you can stop the degenerative curve on the asphalt, and it goes down after you put it in, down, and eventually after 12, 15 years it needs total reconstruction. If you can get money fused in the middle of that curve, you can extend the life of that product considerably into the distance. So it is very confusing sometimes when people will see maybe Mike working on a road that they say, well, this is in very good shape. Well, it is, and what he's doing, he's putting that emulsion down to fill the cracks to keep the water from going into the subbase. So he's doing preventative maintenance, which is a crucial thing to extending the life. So a lot of times a road, halfway through its life cycle, if you put X amount of dollars into it, you will extend the life cycle way out, where if you did it to a bad road, it's zero impact.
So here's when you're talking, because this is a great time of year to actually look at somehow that preventative maintenance helps. So we've had massive rainstorms and then freezing after it. And it just, those cracks that you're talking about, the cracks on all squiggly lines we see on the road. So for a layman like me, that's the squiggly lines. And sometimes some of our roads actually look like they have more of that crack sealing on it than they do asphalt.
Right.
But there's a reason, and like you said, so when we lay in other words, when we lay asphalt down on a road, typically, depending on main road versus side street and so forth, you've got about a 12 to 15 year life cycle.
That's correct.
Somewhere around there. And immediately, as soon as you put it down, it's starting to decay because of traffic. And again, Long Meadow Street, Converse Street, those are going to be much different than my street on Edgewood Avenue.
Right.
Okay. So as that decays, I mean, once it's in disrepair, it's in disrepair. It's either replace the road or you're putting a lot of maintenance money
Right.
into it. And basically what Rich is saying is that if you, somewhere in between that 12 and 15 years, we start putting some money in for preventative maintenance, that 12 to 15 years can become 20, for example, in some cases. So streets are one thing. You can see that. You can,
Right.
as we drive around today, you hit every pothole. You
Right.
say, okay, that needs repair, that needs repair. But the things that we don't see, and the sausage being made and watching the sausage being made is our water, sewer, and drainage lines,
Right.
which are underground. And for example, my street is slated. We replaced sewer lines probably about 15 years ago, maybe, and now it's slated for water mains. They're talking about, and what you're talking about is our engineering department actually trying to put all that together and maybe not taking care of it on. Doing one at a time, you do the whole thing at a time.
Right.
And part of our issue is, and we talked about this, in some parts of our town, we have clay pipe.
Right.
Which the only thing holding it together is the sand that's
Well, that's
compacted
true.
in.
That's true.
So then we have, what's the other one with the?
You can have cast iron,
cast
ductile iron.
yeah. And now
You can have asbestos or
PVC pipe and so
cement
forth.
pipe.
And so we have, as the town was built out over a number of years, you can tell which section was the older sections by the pipe that you dig up. So, we have, even if when we're doing work, and what happened on Maple Road was, as they were doing work on one area, they disturbed piping on another area,
Right.
and that's what caused some of those delays, besides other things. We won't go back to Maple
Right.
Road too much.
Right.
So, we're gonna be able to do that, but then there's another side of it, which is funding. And obviously, again, if I'm an average person, and Rich unfortunately has passed on to me a really horrible disease, which is where you notice all the deficiencies as you drive by in town.
Right.
So you're not noticing the green grass anymore in the field, you're noticing the chipped sidewalk or something as you go
Right.
into, it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way to go through life.
But we have to, when you're trying to balance those priorities of what, people actually see as a deficiency and what we know as a deficiency are two entirely different things. And, doing getting from point A to point B, and again, as we talk about the budget, you're gonna hear about some of the projects that we have coming up, even through capital planning. But then there's also our facilities that need upkeep and repair. We're taping in a brand new high school.
Right.
And there's already capital planning items for a brand new high school that you would think that, how
Right.
did those get on there? And again, whether or not those are necessary, we'll debate that during our meeting. But the facilities, when you look at facilities, even in brand new high school, there's a factor, a number we know that we should be spending on these facilities based on the square footage and,
Right.
and the size, right? Why don't you talk a little bit about what that looks like and what we should be, even in a brand new facility like the high school, because we assume maintenance costs are going to go like this at the high school.
No, they don't.
You're right.
Yeah, Paul brings up a good point, and I don't think we'll ever hit the national figures because they're absolutely astronomical. The industry says you should be putting 2 to 4% away each year for routine and preventative maintenance on the total net cost of your resource. And we have over $1 billion worth of structures in our community and roads and everything else. So that would be $20 to $40 million. So we can see we're never going to get to that point. But if we use that as a target so we can refocus our efforts and all that, the biggest challenge we have right now, Paul, is are we spending the dollars we have today on the highest priority need of our community? Taking into consideration some of the discussion we've had right now and discussion we've had previously on how you prioritize and what makes the best decision for our community. And that is the challenge right now. We're not going to find $300 million, but how are we going to spend the money that we have wisely into the best benefit to our community? And that sometimes going to take a paradigm shift in how we deal with stuff, and it's going to take conditioning of the public, because they're going to see work being done where they say, well, I don't know why they're working there, because it needs to be done there to extend the life cycle out.
Right.
And they say this is going to, I think the best say it's a paradigm shift. The computerization, when it's through, will be a really neat record, because you'll see the different layers of the infrastructure in our community. And the technical branch will be able to say, okay, here's your 50-year-old lines, here's your 20-year-old lines, and it'll all melt together. Another benefit to doing this is that we open an avenue of being able to use some of the enterprise funds to help as we do this section of roadway. So we could jump in and do the sewage, water, maybe the natural gas lines, maybe some drainage, and then in turn we can tack the cost of doing the asphalt repairs to that enterprise fund, because we directly had to go into there, and leave the Chapter 90 for doing your crack sealing and all the other programs. Now, we also, I think I've talked to you, we need to lobby with the state on getting the Chapter 90 formula modified. Right now, it is biased very, very heavily towards high population centers. And we're not a high population center, and we do not have a lot of people that work in our community. So the formulas are skewed against us for this type of community. And the formula's been in place, I believe, for 40-some years. So it's going to be a hard nut to crack. But as I've told you, the semis that travel down Converse Street every day do not originate in the town of Longmeadow.
Right.
They're going from point A to point B, and we're providing them our road system. And Converse was not designed for that traffic. Converse, there's some sections on Converse, when you look at the core samples, they're only 3 inches thick. And you should be riding on a bed of 6-8 inches of asphalt on top of a 12-inch subbase for that type of traffic. Yeah. Now, that's ideal standards. So we've got a long way to get back up to that to meet our current demands.
So I want to go and explain something. Chapter 90 monies, when Rich just referred to it, Chapter 90 is the money that Longmeadow and other communities get back from the state for road repair or pavement management, whatever you want to call it. The town of Longmeadow is in a window and has been for years on average of about 450,000, roughly. We have 90 plus miles of road, somewhere between 90 and 95 miles of road, a paved road. So think about that. We're getting less than $1,000 per mile of road to maintain our system. On top of it, there was just a letter to the editor I read in the paper yesterday from someone that talked about responding to a letter from someone in Longmeadow about traffic for the casino, and it was dead on. It said, did we lobby or mitigate with East Longmeadow when they put in their industrial park? And that's in reference to your tractor trailer analogy that. Or statement that that's where that traffic is originated. Most of it is out of that industrial park, and 30 years ago that wasn't there. Right. And Converse Street, if you go there's not even curbing on most of Converse Street. So it's not meant to be, it was never meant to be a high traffic road. That's correct. Like Longmeadow Street, for example, which is, a little bit different. So, and we've looked into it. I know that at one point we looked into, can you divert traffic off of there, and it's not possible. It's a federal mandated road or state mandated road. So when you look at $450,000 a year to maintain a 90 plus mile system of roads, again, that's been inadequate. It always, and there's times where the state has cut Chapter 90 on communities, and so there's only so much that goes out there. The rest of the money for road projects, whether it's Maple Road, for example, where we're doing sewer and water main replacements, and like you said, the enterprise funds are the sewer fund, sewers, water funds that you might be able to put some of that pavement money onto. Right. So we're very limited in terms of what we get from the state to help us with the pavement management. And so some of that's going to have to come, it has to come out of the budget at some point in time. It has to be added to the budget at some point in time. In addition to it, one of the things that we're talking about at the board level is a DPW facility. And I think there's been no disagreement that the facility is inadequate for what we have. That's correct. Whether or not it's right for what we have, we don't know that either. Right. And we have a fleet, and this gets me to something that, and I'm going to touch base with you on it. If you don't want to go there, you let me know, but outsource it. Outsourcing is a proven strategy that it can help you reduce some costs in certain areas and sometimes provide some better service, depending on what you're looking at. Correct. Because I think when the charter change came around more than 10 years ago, DPW, which was not responsible for field maintenance, all of a sudden became responsible for field maintenance, not just on town fields, but also the school fields primarily. They were not in charge of facilities management. But now we are in charge of, DPW is, and of all of the school buildings and all the town buildings. So when you look at it, we never did an assessment, and I think DPW picked up one employee out of everything when they brought that on. So we have to, my feeling is that we need to determine whether or not we should outsource on some of those things and whether it makes sense. In other words, I know we hire seasonal help for our field maintenance and digging ditches and things like that, and things you don't have to have a full-time staff on. But I think as a town, we got to start looking at every avenue, not just, do we need more employees, but can you outsource it, decrease costs and increase the performance? And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it. I'm not asking you to make a commitment today. That's in the end of the show. But Well, what do you think about it? Because you worked in the federal, let me go, Rich's background is, Rich You manage a large stretch of highway for DC, in the DC area in Virginia.
It wasn't a massive section of highway. It had massive traffic flow. It had 200,000+ vehicles a day.
All right, and a national park.
And a national park.
Okay, so little things.
Yeah, and prior to that, I was on the Blue Ridge Parkway. That was 470 miles of
There we go.
roadway.
So Rich's background, I mean, it's not me trying to tell you how to manage, pave
Right.
a road. You've done this for a
Right.
living. So, and you've outsourced too in your job.
Absolutely.
So what do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of doing that?
Well, there's many, Paul. The first thing is it's a healthy exercise to do an outsourcing review every 4 or 5 years in your organization. It's a healthy part about internally auditing yourself. Are you being competitive? And plus effect is to identify the tasks we're doing. Do we still need to do all those tasks? It's an amazing thing in a maintenance organization. You'll find tasks being performed years after the benefit of that task has disappeared.
Okay.
It's just not needed, but people are in the ruts and the routines and they just keep doing some things. If you do an actual outsourcing review, you would look at from all the way from hiring a person in, the OPEB liability on a position, the overhead of your structures, the equipment, everything would be listed on a piece of paper, and you'd tell how many people you need to maintain, say, our mowing in town.
Yep.
And you'd be an honest evaluation of all those costs, and then you simply go out to vendors and you say, okay, here's the standards that we would like you to maintain our fields at. Give us a price. And it's a very simple process, but it's a healthy process because the real benefit is also tells you as a community leader, do you realize that we spend, let's just say, $2.8 million on field maintenance every year? Because sometimes people are unaware of the total cost of that operation. Right. And it's not just what you have. It's not just the person with a salary. It's the insurance that we pay. It's the benefit package. It's the housing. It's the structures. It's the $80,000 motors that we buy.
Right.
It's all of that rolled into one big thing. So yes, outsourcing, proper application could be a wonderful way to streamline organizations, and also, even if you don't streamline your workforce, even if you take the discretionary dollars, it enables the workforce left to get onto deferred projects that have been deferred because they've been over here working. Okay.
Now, have you ever looked at outsourcing and said, hey, wait a minute, I can actually do a better job by keeping it in-house?
Absolutely.
So it's not always a one-way street?
No, far be it. In the National Park Service, there was a circular that came out, it's called A76, back about 25 years ago, that mandated every federal agency to do labor studies. And we went out and we studied detail of operations, and it was eye-opening to our people because some of our people at that point were unaware of just what an operation really was costing them. We ended up, a lot of times we outsourced mowing, we outsourced lifeguard services, janitorial services. Some cases we outsourced actual mechanical trades, electricians, plumbers. We put them on an on-call basis. So it was different for every location within the National Park Service, but there were some significant savings derived from that contracting effort. And it was a change in our operations and how we did work. Personally, on the George Washington Memorial Parkway, we went to contract mowing. And they are still doing contract mowing to this day, and they increased the level of service to the community, and they decreased the amount of money that we were paying to do that same operation.
So what I hear sometimes on the government side of it, okay, is that when you outsource, you're at the mercy of the contractor. Whatever that means in other words, we don't want to outsource because when it comes time for plowing, they're not going to show up. And yet, communities around Longmeadow are using outsourcing for plowing, for mowing, but especially when you're looking at snowstorms, most communities don't have the equipment today or the personnel to cover everything. So it's a combination. They have their own staff, and then they outsource for other areas that they can't completely cover. So, in your experience, did you find that you were at the mercy of the contractor? You guys signed the contract, said, here you go. What happens when they don't show up? How do you guys deal with that?
Well, you had corrective measures in it, which was usually fairly significant financial liabilities. And we never contracted out something that we considered inherently governmental. In other words, you didn't contract out your law enforcement, your fire protection. You only contracted out items that weren't totally discretionary, but items that you could have slippage in until you got them back up to standard. Now, if you were contracting out electrical service, well, the phone book's full of electricians, so I could immediately get another one. But say in plowing operations, you normally just don't have one vendor anyway. You would have a series of vendors that you could pull. And in the right community, such as the Washington, D.C. area, there's thousands and thousands of landscape businesses that plow snow in the winter. significant amount of snow plowing in Northern Virginia is done under contract right now, including the highway systems, the major highway systems. They have the VDOTs and the MDOTs, and have discovered long ago that a lot of times they could do better by contractors because the equipment was there and they were ready to roll with it.
They could have used that in Atlanta in the last
Yeah, and there are a lot of communities, yes, they could have.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of communities, even up here, when you really get talked to the Director of Public Works, you will find out that certain aspects of their snow removal operation is contractors. Especially in the residential areas, they'll bring the landscape plows in, the little smaller plows, and they have certain routes that they run. And they're not massive routes, and they have a variety of them. So yeah, the bottom line is do your research and lay the plan out, evaluate it, and see if there's true savings for the community.
Right.
And weigh it against the pitfalls of possibly having a blip or a hiccup.
See, and Rich mentioned something. There's besides just the salary you pay for the person, we also pay. There's benefits, health insurance, and you still pay unemployment insurance and things like that. But then there's something else, and you've heard it on the board discussion of OPEB liability. These are other post-employment benefits that are not pension related. So it's the health insurance and so forth. And Long Meadow, just like mainly every other community in the world, or in the United States, has an outstanding pension liability. And we're taking some corrective action on that. We have a separate fund for that. But when you look at all of those costs, in addition to the equipment costs, and that's how you analyze a program and say, here's like you said, here's what does it cost to mow that field. And you include everything, and then you make a decision. So, and that's, I'm looking at it from the standpoint, and I've been an advocate for the last few years, and it hasn't really gone anywhere because I want to see us go through the exercise. Because it's either going to come back and say, hey, it's a pretty good idea, and let's start it over here and get into it, or there's no way we can outsource because we're just working our guys like dogs. And that could be a combination of the two things. And either way. So let me ask you, you've been on the board for 2 years, and year and a half, 2 years?
Coming up on 2 years, yeah.
What do you see, and Rich, besides that, Rich was the chairman of the Capital Planning Committee for a few years.
I think it was two.
So
two
you
or
saw
three.
the underbelly of the beast.
Yeah.
And my question is, what do you think is the biggest, what is our biggest concern that we should be addressing in the next few years?
I think it's the long range, from a capital perspective, it's the long range infrastructure repairs that we see. They're tremendous. They're going to be tremendous, even though if we implement a fantastic plan. But I think we should spend most of our time now developing an implementation plan. Start small, finish big. And how are we going to tackle this? And this is going to take collective efforts of a lot of the great people in the town, like select board members, finance members, sitting at a table and really talking about what is a viable solution. What is our debt ratio? What can we afford to do as far as our debt? And lay them all on the table, and after we've done that exercise, then we can see how much is left. Then I think we have to start doing more lobbying to Boston. We have to go for more money. We have to find innovative ways to show our needs, and I think Chapter 90 is one. I think we could swell our funds. Recently I talked to you, I believe our town engineer has discovered that there was a hiccup in the amount of miles that we were being reimbursed for. Now, originally we thought it was about 10%. I believe now it's got down to maybe 5%, but still, in all the future years now, we are likely going to receive more money on our Chapter 90 just because that hiccup was found. Just an inventory check. That's all it was between the two databases. So I think, Paul, you have to form some type of legacy that stays within the community. We cannot rely upon town managers coming and going or select board members coming and going. We have to step back a little bit deeper and make a charter of the whole community. How are we going to manage infrastructure and all these other programs that we see going forward? And set up a system that transcends through your membership on the board, my membership on the board. It becomes a living way of doing business in this community. You can con the old thing, paradigm shift, but it is true. We need to look for something that is going to be institutionalized and we leave as a legacy for the community. I think that's the most important contribution you and I can make is a legacy.
Okay, and I agree. And one of the things I want people to understand is that this hasn't come about because of dereliction of duty. I mean, when 20 years ago, roadways were fine. We didn't have the traffic we have today. 20 years ago, most of the sidewalks were fine. But as time has gone on, there have been other needs in the community which have drawn those resources away from where they should have been. And there really wasn't, we had a separately elected water and sewer commission at the time, and there really wasn't a lot of effort. Actually, they did some good things where they were saying, look, let's lower the water rates. So instead of water and sewer rates, so instead of keeping it at an even level or maybe increasing it slightly each year to provide for infrastructure repair, their attitude was, let's give it back to the ratepayers. And I get that. That's not a bad thing. But we really didn't have that long-range plan of what we need to do. And I agree. I mean, you have the $300 million elephant in the room, and, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And I think that I think some of it happens, we get, paralysis by analysis and saying, oh my God, we got this big nut. We're never going to be able to do it, so let's not look at it.
It's not well.
It's over there, but I know I can
Right.
see it, but I'm not going to see it. In addition to it, we have 2 middle schools, which are drastically aging.
Right.
And so we know something's going to have to be done with those. The 3
do.
elementary schools have been recently done. I say recently, in the last 10 to 15 years, all of them have been done. But they're still going to need some major, probably upkeep at some point in time in there. Then we also have the town facilities, and if you
Right.
go look at town hall, it's probably inadequate for everything you would want to put in there. And then you have the other assets like the community house and so forth. The reality is it's there. And so I agree with you that we have to go and look at creating something that goes far beyond a 3-year term of a
Right.
select board member. Because
Right.
first of all, we're not going to solve it in 3 years.
No.
And if you and I propose we put $2 million more in the budget than what's there, it's probably not going to fly right now anyway.
Right.
There has to be a collective buy-in of everybody,
Right.
all committees on that. So I agree 100% with that. I think the other thing that I see is that we've operated kind of in bubbles, and when you look at our budget as a town, 80% of it is salary. Take it right off the top.
Right.
It's salary, benefits, that type of thing. So out of the 80% that's salary, then you have a little bit that's maintenance, and there's probably this much out of a big $55+ million budget. It's less than 1% that's probably discretionary.
Yeah, I don't know what our figures are, but it gets down pretty small.
Yeah, so we're not really talking we have an extra $5 million in a budget to play with or anything.
No.
So this is really going to require some creative financing techniques that I would say. But so when you look at that, and we know that we got to put this together, this group or plan or so forth. If you had to pick a project that needed attention, whether it's roadways, the underneath of the roadways or buildings, where do you think we need to look at right away?
I'm not even going to mention a resource. I think we'll come back to the fact is strategically, planning-wise, we need to determine where do we want our community to be 20 years from now. And when we have a collective agreement on where we want it to be, then we can start, as you say, take the small pieces and start to plan. But I think that's a major task. That is the largest contribution that the select board could make to this community.
And that's why I'm sorry, and I wanted to go down that road with you. When you look at where we are today, and it's things deteriorate slowly.
Right.
And you don't notice a curbing that's a little failing, chipping away, and then all of a sudden there is no curbing. And the pieces are out in the middle of the road.
Right.
And it happens over time, the decay. And whether you have standards or not, and I think some of that is, I don't know what our standards are.
Right.
And I think that's also part of that definition of overall.
That's right.
What should the standards of the community be? And I think the expectation is different than what the standards are. I think
Right.
everybody expects it to be perfect, but we don't fund it to be perfect. I don't
Right.
even know if we fund it to be adequate. So I think that, the installation of standards and putting together some sort of program is what we really need to do here because, letting things decay, like you said, in that road, if you can stop the decay early, you actually can probably extend your resources as well.
And that gets into the mechanics of how we do it. And you're absolutely right. What I see is what I consider a lack of standards, and I'm not saying that negatively, but if a maintenance worker is out doing their work and they do not know what the job should look like when they leave it, they may leave it how they feel it should be left. And that's down in the nuts and bolts, setting up standards for every resource in our community. It's a very important aspect, but that's down in the lower levels of the organization. Right. And as I say, as you come up, we get to higher levels of understanding. I had a particular amount of discomfort when we put in the meals tax this year, and which was a very beneficial tax put in to help the community. But we had an amendment that we put on the town board, on the town floor, that said, let's specify that this money is going to go over into this fund. And it was amazing to watch the amendment be defeated and the tax be put in. And that was, I guess, maybe could be $150,000 now that has gone from where it could have been a specialized course into the general budget, and it can disappear very quickly when it gets behind in the budget.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's these little things that I think we could set direction if we could, because you and I were at a conference where they were talked about a community that now has $4 million in a fund that has been generated from hotel and taxes, and it's open for projects to be put in. And now the community has got to the point where they're getting very critical how they spend that money.
Right.
And they're voting against a lot of the what-if projects and going for the real meat projects. And I would love for us to get to that position where we had these massive amount of funds that we could disperse to the highest priority needs.
You see, I'm optimistic in the sense that, $300 million is a total fix-up of the whole town, and obviously you can't get there from here. But I am optimistic that I think there's enough boards and people talking about this now that it will finally get to be addressed.
Right.
And there's only so much, and I think the message I want everybody to take away from today is that I think, first of all, I think we are where we are because of what's happened over a number of years, not just in the last couple of years or anything like that. So you can't put a finger on it and say that's when it started. But I think we all need to understand that this has to be tackled. It's not going to go away.
Right.
It's either that or you actually have complete failures of facilities and buildings and roadways to where it's an emergency repair and you will be spending $5 million on something that might cost you $2 million.
Right, that's true.
And I really think that the message is it will be addressed, it's going to be addressed, but stay tuned as you hear about it through the budgets and so forth. But I wonder if you have any final shots you want to take?
Your one point's well taken. 3 years ago, we never talked about asset management, and now everybody's on the tip of everybody's tongue. So progress is taking place. A paradigm shift is in the process of happening.
Right, and sometimes that shift can take a while, but it's getting there.
And I'm optimistic. I got several years.
Good. And so, Rich, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank you for watching, and stay tuned for future episodes of The Upside. We'll bring you all the good stuff happening in Long Meadow. You have a great day. Thank you.